Jumbo, Yonde, the Shen, Bo, Jumbo, Yonda, Bo, Sanje, Ribo, no, Shasu, Dembo, the One, Shibo, Judenjo, Jubo, the Kalo, Joa, no, Nebo, Mono, Meno, Jumbo, Sanje, John, the Bejo, Jojo, 上次路就多就做这哦，好些光年做我这当子，啥钱都能公布电波，马年节点都能就这送，这些给我就来上次，弄到公安处都做上我，一些叫做随着能不。找不完决定送到那年我公布去年叫了上次，先就电报正面到月州，先多找我叫了上次，对着接着随波送我的两面全见叫了上次。广播突厥接电报，当街前边电报。是那一天叫做这，毕竟是那相子，大边的长着我就给人个送的着，几多的当就就把心就那相子，这年这月那样的老婆到那着的。先给到把一点点给的那样相子。第八这样么叫些给我们送走吧，让给三年用手的点点上街点吧，干嘛让人忙面当就忙喜欢吃吧，面浪路到真道不，都是就能得到。所能的月堂前是宝爷，不光到年卷卷着的，我当那当七月老主，随便错来着我着我哟。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of the lineage trained who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness and having no characteristics, are born and unceasing. They are not impure or pure, they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra. The mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. And the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
Namo no gombo juzhen jambe yana changze lo kangye lo zhu zhi ni zhi zhi ni da na da sha se jie ni de ge jie jin zi xie ni jie du ga le gong zi kang da si bie zhe ra ma ri min dong ye jie zi yun Lo zo gen la bu jie da zi yin la zhu jie yang de song. Lo da jie zhu ni mo ni lu de jie zha zhu lu zi jin. Ma re mi zi dong ye niu gu ji ni jun zi ri zhu. 天年道见所见道此有天理足，有人出云无，觉着觉当觉念觉觉道理明，扬别扬了的，阿拉巴扎那的，阿拉巴扎那的。Ram Bala de de Chira de Dale de Mo me ba la se Pa da de je lo do ba yi Lo de ba be na wa do do Ajin be 修一切呀没有呀多，找一切呀留一切，念的一切呀不一切，少一切一切呀多，没有呀的呀没有呀。Lo ye ge ya no ya no ye je ya no she ya mo yo ye de jo ya sa lo ya mo o ya bo ye je ya no je ya jo ya ge ya go ya no 见缘自我也只也只也能见缘多也错也别也少也自也莫错也就也就也就也就不 Oh, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, no, but no, me, no, no, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, but so, yeah, no, Rinpo Chen, Dao Ge Shi O, Ben De Di Ju, Ga De Chen Bi Guo Ne Jie Zong De, Guo Song Du Jie, Guo Zhu Zu Du Su, 偏左给了是月准备过，大雁若月着我不月松，马列西上节节随便多， 小姐做的那所望的，多觉清波的心多觉强，觉在的罗波那那罗波，边觉着边波那的上，娘嘞心老觉那所望的，上波多面一年当着的。秋天的月的当着边边，直到过上这年所年么，家前学边就那所望的，两人有面手间都着呢，大王着把这边过着间。三界观众爸爸要塞苏，萨满大约觉罗所望的，协助当别中阿的上，巴当天边面光中正见，念着那些过去所拉苏，嘎当那么那拉所望的。望见心间作业从阿母，我到这边我说就早年，当我这边到我开着呢，要是就把这老所望的，要从滚的老马多坚强，完了高的千年之中呢。说到天梦我中所在边，真见老母能拉所望，让家所绕跟拉到一边，给上淘宝这边就我就，在月这边到看这把夜，三在新年能拉所望的。叫我更多样到那么多，这面去这边了我世界，撒到那这有点少做呢，多久强给过，念到一chỗ三界就当做界就那了，想求不多到年就做。大约就这边所能的，多了变形三界诸波就三界就左界就能了，想求不多到年就做。大约就这边所能的，多了变形三界诸波就三界。就当作业就能了，想求不多当年就做，老给姐姐这边所难的，多了平时上节如果有。哎呀，哎呀，那么这，同他你，他刚当别人嘛，是个下个是那的，啊。네 통탄이라 샤와니 토마 균론지와는 타마 봉화체고 하세요. 토마 균론지와 대한지 미유당 당미세고로 차지다 강야매 받지 허드까지 지전용의 소리지 많이 받지. 아니 지 내가도 타도기 푸다는 것이 왜지라니 차지다 땜비토네. 내지 랭거지 백은 인생에게는 뭐자체 받지요 아니나 근데를 대받침 보세요. 내가도 타도 자신이 그게 대한 중에 가사지라 대받침도 가사서라 그러.
As it is a custom or the tradition of Kadampa masters, whenever we engage in the practice of Dhamma or receiving the teachings of the Dhamma, there are two activities that are very important, emphasized strongly. Those are the activities in the beginning, which is cultivation of appropriate motivations, and activities at the end, which is dedications. So when it comes to the activities in the beginning of the cultivation of appropriate motivations, our motivation should be based on influences or the generations of altruistic intentions. One should have a motivations of moving towards achievement of happiness, of temporary happiness, and then that of the lasting happiness or the ultimate happiness. And this too, not only for one's own happiness, but also having a strong motivations of working for the welfare of others' happiness as well. In other words, one should have these motivations of working for the welfare of one's own self and that of other sentient beings, which will then become a Mahayanan motivations, without which one's motivation will not become a Mahayanan motivations.
당가서 거서 보발라래 좀 체내 집에 가서들라 들리지 그것에 들리게 체내 상황지 당가서 카보레다 하나요 다 말랑 수치죠 생각 내봐도 그걸.
So at this moment, we are receiving the teachings, the profound teachings, the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment or the Lam Rim Chenmo. So therefore, suddenly it is the motivation is something that is very, very important for us to cultivate. And so although we may not really become a completely qualified the disciples of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, we must at least have a genuine aspiration so that you have a strong motivation that I will do my best to endeavor on the receiving these teachings and followed by the practice. So this is something that is very important.
다 되게 교론 치바 좀 비단달라네 랑게 되는 거 같으냐네 또 되게 더 투병 볼라네 라르지 나만나지네 지 고심바대야 코로지 가면은 슈르서 지 많이 봐 안투 지심면만에 가서 마시딩에 제미 받체 근데 라다라냐게 타고도 선제되다야 지 소소지 남에지는 로도 많이 봐 근데 저더래서 생에 좀 내나 슈베게 좀 투병 버츠가 나만나라 지 저더래어지 저심바지 왜 저기 미바잖아. 아니 지 디진라데 내가 컨트롤하는 미비 대바 슈치 뭐요나 마스젤라면 아니 이제 다 저와 슈치 뭐요 하다나 내가 가만히 있지 미바쟁이다.
In order to maintain our motivations, the positive motivations that we talked about earlier, here now we visualize Buddha Shakyamuni before oneself, surrounded by all other great Lam Rim, the lineage teachers, or the masters of the Lam Rim lineage. And they are delightfully, imagine that they are delightfully gazing at us and having a sense of caring and sense of connectedness with all of us. And similarly, imagining oneself being in their presence, surrounded by all other sentient beings. And sentient beings who have a genuine faith as one does all other sentient beings, have a genuine faith towards those great beings, object of refuge in other words, and then from our part try to extend our compassion towards all other sentient beings with the faith towards the object of refuge and compassion towards all other sentient beings. With this too, let's take a couple of minutes to meditate.
당가 저기 된게지 가르사 담미나로 지잖아 되지 지 가서 초과산에서지 세그레베 지레베 뭐인데 제가 템버지레서 오늘 저거 거리지로 가서 뒤세지 땅에 내가 지 저거여서나 전제지 노도 문도 생긴데 다지 저거에 다 나중에 내가 쓰이나 내가도 그에 지지로 와.
So now it is to ask ourselves a question by saying that whatever we are doing right now, it is just mere process of ritual, or it is something else. Are we really engaging in some kind of ritual performance, or we're participating in a ritual gathering, or something else, or we're doing something which correspond to reality, or something that we're learning something that correspond to reality. So this is the kind of question that one need to ask ourselves.
나 된저기 좋아지 그 소소 좋아지다로 그거 말이야. 소소기 좋아지 거는데 아니 소소게 내 당대 간에도 로 소소가 쓰세고 로. 맞아 주제디 랑게 대원 되거래 대원 되었다지 대화 두고야나 아니 대화 생각한데 지래 아니 대화 두시디 시작을 거 말이야. 두시디 시작은 미 첨부자네 두고를 거 말이야. 됐어.
So now here that having asked this question, then one should look at oneself and to analyze one's current situation at this point. Think about what kind of situation that we have right now, what kind of situation that we are experiencing at this point. We all have a common goal of achieving happiness and overcome suffering. That is common to all of us. However, are we really doing something as we wished? Are we really doing something that becomes the cause for achieving happiness and overcome suffering? So what is the happiness that we are seeking for? What is happiness means? And how do we really achieve happiness? What kind of actions that we may engage in to become the one's action as a cause for achievement of one's happiness and so on.
나 등록이 받아야 돼. 가서 메도나 저기 세대 대지 좋다라. 다가 저기 지 세리바 세나리 강제 개발 세나리 총바 세나리 다 유바 세나 신바 세나 연수 저거게 세대 대지 좋다라. 타고를 거잖아. 신주 전에 다 강제 메세대 배송 소바지 루트가 돼 세버 세자 차고 와. 다 대장지 가서 나오는 리그도 다 텔레마드 시 고범도 살아서나 미세게 단다 가서데 칼리전에 체크해서 기야 말아. 근데지금 지금 내와제 아니 텔레전백이 포탈은 대치지 그거요. 텔레전 포탈은 뭐지 소소 로고 여반에 지기 선언되지야나 아니 로에 자든지 제거가 돼야 이제 때문에 나중에 여기 며칠이 로다지로.
So in this world, all sentient beings, particularly human beings, including oneself, right from the beginning of our life up until now, we always exert an effort to achieve happiness. And whatever we do, we are hoping for our happiness. That is what we do. So, but the happiness that we talked about at this point, we are talking about it. Our way of looking for happiness is happiness of this life alone. We're not looking beyond that. It is for this purpose, all works of people in this world, whether they are scientists, whether they are teacher, whether they are farmer, or whether they are businessmen, and so on and so forth. All of them are, exerting an effort to take all kind of activities to achieve happiness. But all those happiness are really focused on the happiness of this life alone. But now, for us as a practitioner, followers of the Dharma, is there any happiness other than this life alone? This is the question that we need to ask. If there is, then it is also a wise to seek for a method which actually enables one to accumulate causes and conditions for giving rise to the happiness, not only for this life alone, but also the life that is to become.
ndopandwa kongmya bate soso ton hagore maso chunju tasone tadachi chedama soso lechi goebichi saemegi solechi ndopande tadachi goebi sone sonachi maso chunju buguma ami kobona ma chene jene te tandapala tandalechi goebi sona rote tandale shuchen ma de shuchon romendo ngalechi gogure legachi samebi solechi na ndopachi kongmebi solechi nganga shushu lende chido 되게 가른 지금 말했잖아. 세대 대지도 꼬라 가서 저샤나. 너가 가야지 매바데 쓰보대요.
So now, just mere accomplishment of happiness of this life alone is not something that really fulfills our desire. Period. Because right from our childhood up until now, what we are doing is where we endeavor on all kinds of actions to achieve happiness. And regardless of what kind of mundane achievement that we may have achieved in our life, all of this seems something lacking. We feel dissatisfied with whatever the achievement that we may have. So this really proves that happiness for achievement of happiness for this life alone is not something that is satisfactory. This is how we always feel. We do everything that we try to do something and we try to achieve something. Even though that we may have achieved through our hard work, but we still feel like something is missing. Why this is happening? It actually entails that our achievement of happiness of this life alone is not something that is ultimate, not something that really, something that is lasting, or is what we call the ultimate happiness. So in order to achieve happiness beyond happiness that we have achieved, for that we need to find a method. We need to seek a method and skillful means which actually enables one to achieve satisfactory happiness, in other words. For that, in which that we are actually following the teachings of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which is actually the source of this teaching is given by Buddha himself to his followers, and who actually followed these teachings and gone through this rigorous practice and gain spiritual realizations. So this is the method or the skillful means which provides us a satisfactory happiness. That is the teaching that we are receiving today. So with this, the above, the four outlines are actually covered with this introductions. But now, the fifth outlines is the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught actual instructions, which has two subdivisions: how to rely on the teachers, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and how the students train their mind after having relied on the teacher.
당한 로가 다 담방은 좀 한번 지다 제일 발라니 디때는 님볼렘 비시 그거다 님 가서 란지 자와신 때는 로치다 자이데 바니 다 때는 로치다 자이데 발라니 디때는 님볼렘 비시 그거다 님보치다렘 비스니 다 동본지자 다 님보치다렘 비스들라니 란지 나자랑 게 님볼렘 츠그 란지 나자랑 게 바치다 님볼렘 츠모치 다 동본지자 다 님볼렘 츠모들라니 송 주변 중요다 대모에 나제를 많이 하서는 주변 된다 주변 챔피언 나제를 많이 하서는 제제 다 동번이 인제다 다 주변 챔피언 나제를 많이 하서는 질러서 대전라 주변과 담바 세제 코나 된바 세대 제다 집이 수 세제는 쇼발로 주제제 다 동번이 인제다 다 세제는 쇼발로 주제되라 송 세제는 로발로 로그비 전세 로발로 레올로 상제면 루바 된바 로발로 로비 림바 니시바지 다 동번이 인제다 다 로발로 로비 림바 니시바들라니 대바체 뭐 줄라라지다 체바도 파세 로제 대바로 주의지 다 동보라 동보라 니사래 상선 절라발로 한대 장마 장내 저스지 담바서 손에 제단에 주의지 다 동번이 인제다 다 손에 제단에 주의들라니 갈라로비 손 갈라로비 제 텔라바는 데지 텔라로비 림바지 다 텔라로비 림발라니 니 쇼바질라라지다 체바도 파세 타마니라로 주의지 다 동보라니 랑게 산제 주주면 바시고 바로도 심발라지다 제주 주면 바시고 디용고바잖아 주의지 다 동보라 주 심발라지 추준라지 저발라지 존재라지 상대라지 싫어라 주의지 다 대연하게 가서 자세제 담바서네 상 자세제 쇼발로 파신 주다 디용고바지 니에베나네 바보 파신 주게 나에네 손바 네즈베 파신라로지 네즈베 파신 사제 네 원로부터 소유 변화에네 출란 가상에 센치서 바스 사제리 가도 되려.
So now we are on the particular chapter of how to train in the Bodhisattva state in general, which has two parts. It's a training in the perfection that matures the qualities you will have when you become the Buddha. And then the second is training the 4 ways to gather disciples that help others to mature. So out of these two, we are on the first outlines, which is training in the perfections. There are 6 perfections. Out of the 6 perfections, we have already covered the perfection of generosity and perfection of morality. So we are on the perfection of patience. And in the patience, when it with regard to the perfection of patience, there are 3 different kinds. And out of these 3, so we're on the developing the patience of the certitude about the teachings, which is the third division of the patience.
다 출렁에 세주서 봐. 다가 가도 로게다마 저대로 출렁에 세주서 봐. 문에 저 이나도 가시는 게 질러들어서 아주 추진을 내려서는 변해서 봐세대 가르데 존재스는 가르데 샤라스는 가르데 소소소소는 문제 제도와 인소나 근데 라네 때문에 또 해줘요. 이제 미지 사자 때를 해네. 맞아 랭귀지 빼고야나 근데 같이 해서 해고 말해서 해줘. 대만은 맞아 다다 아니 이게 미단에 찾진 가는 랭귀지도 다야 되지로.
So it is now, whenever we engage in many kind of practice, our practice must be conjoined with this practice of generosity, practice of morality, practice of patience, practice of diligence, and so on and so forth. It doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, I will be in the particular chapter that actually enables me to engage in practice of patience and so on and so forth. This doesn't, it shouldn't be. And one's practice, whenever we engage in the practice, one's practice must be conjoined with the 6 perfections.
당가 속에 그런 원을 시에서나 저바기 세다 간치질이 세버려서나 아니 동해를 주문량 비서바 생기지다 동해 단내 제여서 받지다 아니 출라 년생 저서 봤습니다 송된 건지 지켜서 와이나 아니 라니를 강에 트비가라 카티 자도 시에 들어와
So we have already talked about this. There are actually the three main, you know, the practice of patience. So the patience, the developing the patience of disregarding harm done to you, and developing the patience of accepting sufferings, which actually voluntarily accepting sufferings, well, literally, and then developing the patience of the certitude about the teachings.
다 뒤에 가서 라네데 동해에서는 내 동해 단내 주서가 생기냐네 간데 제국고 요나서는 지 소소로 되는지요나 아니 라네 쳔모기 자이 까차는도 아니 저바 카툴라 몽원에 아니 동해 단내 시den가라 동해 연비거라 아니 녜테 단내 지 동해 두스 제국고 두다 생기 아니 코로나에 시주 제통해지나 말라네 쳔모고는 따라면서 세면도아 맞춰나 강에데 가디는 여여 말이지로.
So now, if we were to ask ourselves, so what is meant by developing the patience of accepting sufferings? When such question is asked oneself, if one is not certain what kind of practice is talking about, what kind of development of the patience that we were talking about, if this happens, then one should immediately open the book of this great deities on the stages of path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim Chenmo, and then you look at the contents, read the contents, where it says the chapter of patience. Then you can flip that book, and then read this the section of the patience.
네, 자자 정원원 지기수 네 신주 전부 지셔서냐 소도도 신주 전부는 자자는 시코노 카투게 쇼라 그전에 뭐 과대보마도 뭐는 주바도 과대보면도아 근데 걸어야 저비 카투에서나야 저바템 비전 안에 처음에는 가이나 저바템 비전 카투는 판단에 아니 야 제바이토는 고알레 되어들어요.
So therefore, it's always sometimes, often, emphasize on reading the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Because in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, when it comes to the practice of patience, it's the verse of the practice of patience, practicing patience is something that is very comprehensive. However, if we just go through reading of all those Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the entire verses, then it is not that comprehensive. But when you go to the one particular verse, that if you pick one particular verse, it is very, very comprehensive. So then, particularly then, if you are, if you look at the Lam Rim Chenmo, the explanation, the precise explanation that is given by Lama Tsongkhapa is something that is very marvelous. So if you can always look at the Lam Rim Chenmo, and it is so comprehensive.
Tela soba yeti tombaji kola tagunere any shanchu sen pya kola tagunere baye temba kola tagun ka kato yensona sosoge inchi miji jonji lo te mago ayina de yin jepa kandu ti sungo choshoro jepa kanje chi kashi kasewa na yang kaselo yang chi leda mangwa gi yang chi shinlo juwe tendre cheba jache jandwa.
So this is how, when you are reading about the bodhicitta, or you're reading about the wisdom realizing emptiness and so forth, and if you are unable to understand, then you can, open the commentaries, books such as Lam Rim Chenmo. It gives you a clear explanations, precise explanations. Just as one is unable to understand the verse in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, then you can just suddenly, whichever the chapter there you're reading about, and you can just open the Lam Rim Chenmo, and it will give you a clear explanation of the verse that you have been reading in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and so on.
Tela soba ge soso renje toni diso inchi tono kodebo ramanda soya sarwa ne kodebo che yana ene tetsu kosona 아니 다 요 고샤가 된 거서 배샤가 소월에 고아 배토는 하세 때 많이 봐. 근데 고아의 소속이 취랜 통해지. 아니 소속이 연주 배샤 가져나요. 라지를 산나동의 방지 통해지. 근데 지전에特상권선 저 와.
So I'm pretty sure there are many precious, profound, and vast texts were translated in English in something that is something that is explained and translated in a very comprehensive way, in a very lucid form. So just read those texts, the very important texts, and then try to understand the meaning of whatever the text that you are reading. And then again, having understood the meaning, not just so I understood the meaning, and don't keep this meaning and live the meanings that you shouldn't live on the within the book itself, but try to connect that meaning to your continuum and try to make this meaning beneficial to your development of your continuum.
다 somba chue la ngepa semba la maybe zoba jeba la sondo. Ani maybe yu di je de sondo. Chue la nge senje zoba se de ani soso ge mepa je se ge yu du ta tenki san de ji soso denso ya san de ji yonguro wa denso de ji yonguro.
So Neil here is now developing the patience of certitude about the teachings, right? The patience of certitude about the teachings means generating the forbearance of the convictions. It has 8 objects.
다 maybe le je de tang yu ne tang je sa yu ne ani koncho song je yu den no so. Ani ngo de sha yu ne da me ba ni je de khona ni do sondo.
So then here it said the patience of certitude about the teachings means generating the forbearance of conviction. It has 8 objects. The first it says the object of faith. This is the good qualities of the 3 jewels. And the second, the objects to be actualized. This is the reality of the 2 selflessness.
다 디시게 신주 쟁에 제소나 시고 배는 이제 대셔버 보세는데 진은 로사코는 배는 당연히 대세서나 연대 통비톤에 당연히 대지제 당연히 대 제비톤은 소속의 란에도 뭐도 제 가르 거잖아. 아니 다음에 바니 대코나니 대라니를 거야 돼 소용이 근데 다니다긴 거 세대 다른 차이.
So here now, right from the beginning, when it comes to the object of faith, so it just says object of faith, but in the Lam Rim, the actual original book, it says a Dawei Yu, which is the clear faith, which is not translated in English here. It's just object of faith, but it's just an object of clear faith, in other words. So here, now when it comes to the object of clear faith, the really term, the clear faith, rejects the creation. Because this is the good qualities of the 3 jewels. How do we really, generate the clear faith? The clear faith can be generated only by understanding, by seeing the qualities, by understanding the qualities of the 3 jewels.
되지. 다 담에니 세디 다 취제 담에는 간사기 담에 세대니 취취기 때는 만다 아마도 아니 담에니데 라지마도 그러나 산다고라. 다 가솔레 되니 라소아이나 아니 서간라 라소시고 말이니.
So then the object to be actualized is this is the reality of 2 selflessness, which is the selflessness of person and selflessness of phenomena. Although the selflessness itself, the nature of selflessness has no difference, whether it is selflessness of person or whether it is selflessness of phenomena, but there's a difference in the basis of the selflessness, the nature of that there's no difference in nature of selflessness, but the difference is it's only the basis of the selflessness. One is person and one is just phenomena. Generally.
다 depuis ne sanje sanje 상선은 퇴치고 때 대형 문바시비 투당 파르디 심바 쪽에다 내지제비 투모 레 투송모 소도 투 세데 단지 남의 년지 대권한 얘기에서나 강사대 투칭 못하고로.
So now next is that says the desired object to be unit, yeah, desired object. So desired object, this is the great power of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, of which there are three: the power of knowledges, the power of six perfections, the power of which is innate.
되지. 다 코로이 개체는 당문바 심바되는 당문시의 라바의 신세 시병문시에는 현대 주문 매매는 제도 그래. 그 내가 강요 받된 도 그래. 아니 바로 대신 바 쪽이 냐네는 다나가서 시신비 가서 차텐데래. 나 현지세도 아니 대통령님이 위시게 현지대 있는 메시 배제 민도 성도도. 관제 된적이 아니 상제 상주 선바 대다라 된적이 투침보다 나와 있잖아요. 아니 현대 주발은 매매는 좀 차그래. 세죠로.
So now if the desired object that we talked about here is this is the great powers of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, of which there are three powers of the super knowledge. So if you have a super knowledge, then you will be able to understand how do we work for the welfare of other sentient beings without any hindrances, because you know what is appropriate for the individual. How do we really go ahead and help those individuals and so forth. Then the power of six perfections, certainly. And then the power of which is innate. The power of innate, which is said that probably referring to the non-dual great bliss and emptiness.
So much. 랑도지 유네 당가서 안에 가르도 고르세나 아니 레바시바다 네바시비 저다 대다게 저거 려바다 민려바데 데니스 샤오 소.
So then the fourth, it says the object to be adopted. This is wanting both cause and good deeds and the effects of the deeds. And then the fifth is that the object to be discarded is the wishing to avoid both the cause and misdeeds and the effects of these deeds.
당가서 되제가 저기 랑도니네 가서 되제 코로 연다잖아. 도케니데 도샤레 몰라니 달라자레세 최선은 두스러와. 총사시는 체리기 대지 된다라야나야 지 제보다 대화쇼기 장시 강론의 폐비쇼기 지라 아니 배전체네 인조에다 근데 장시 강론의 뇌비체네 아니 센터도는 도버쇼 소원나 이게 된저게 단단한 안에 또 여러 총사는 시나.
So normally when we talk about the object to be adopted and the object to be discarded, so object to be discarded, normally in general, it refers to the suffering and an origin of sufferings. This to be the object that is to be discarded, and object to be adopted, which refers to this to the second sets of the four noble truths such as cessation and the path which leads to the cessations. Those two are the object to be adopted. And however, not only that, but also for us, just think about ourselves and what is worthwhile to be adopted for us, particularly of speaking about something that is worthwhile, which actually worthwhile, which provides us not only the temporary, but also which brings us happiness and so forth. And what is harmful that is to be discarded. And just as the 8 verses of mind training had stated that when you go through the analysis, as soon as you see there's the deceptive or the defilements is about to arise in your mind, and try to recognize that and avert it. So this is what is meant by the object that is to be discarded. We need to discard that kind of thoughts and so forth.
이게 내가 최초에 가르쳐 거잖아. 남주 배쳐도는 일 신주제네. 근데 댕키바기 로랑지를 잡아라. 근데 샤완되던 데시 샤완은 주 고래. 근데는 주네 출랭에 세지 잡아 제그리 소야 돼.
So this what it really says is now by using our own intellect and analyze. That is something in this particular chapter really emphasize on. We must analyze by using our intellect, and once you have used your intellect and analyze very carefully, when you come to understand what is to be discarded and what is to be adopted, will then enables one to develop the patience of certitude about the teachings.
다 투상지 제스 주비 유네 안송도 시지유데 마타발라 소발라 종롱베 셰도 떡지 리지 리우네 소라야나 주니라 소비 담비 추라 제바송베 대전의 샤고스 냐모모 송도.
So then the object of meditation, that is the goal to be achieved, and this is enlightenment, right? And then the object of meditation, that is method for achieving the goal. This is all paths of training in the spirit of enlightenment.
다티노 가서 지랑루 세그래 지랑루데 오마데 송도와 맞게 투상고수 제사선이 호조 제사기 유대 출렁에 세제디 용질은 호조 제제 유대 소소로 연락 주니를 제바데 아니 도기롱데 타는 송도 지기랑루 더가라래서 나는 제반도 송도 이나미시.
So then it's the object of subsequent practice through study and reflections, according to Dolungpa, and this refers to the province of which is to be known, such as impermanence and so forth, and then power of lineage chapter of the Bodhisattva's level mentioned that 8 is the sublime teachings, the 12 branches of the scriptures, and so forth. So I think we have to take it as being this.
텔레 현상문이야도 기여 말했다. 출렁에서 변화 상추 생각에 조 용을 тө상 제나라는 제외될 거라. 네, 변화가서 이거 나치 생겨라네. 양내 있는 로고 써야 돼. 가서 드디어 가담비 시작이 됐는데 아니 이거 나치 생겨라 양내 있는 로고를 써야 되는데 아니 내려내 말이 성게 기매와.
So now here, when it comes to this, and everything, according to the Kadamba masters, everything that as the practitioners, when we read our texts, one should read the text so that even a one word or even a one syllable in the Tibetan syllable or the alphabet, among the alphabets, except the syllable na. Even the one syllable na should be an instruction for one's own practice. This is how we should have capability of everything that one reads becomes a spiritual instruction for oneself, practice, instruction for one's practice.
그런 게 기계야만 해. 거기대로 맞아요나 가서 처음 메타반에서는 상제기 살은 로시베 야나 현재 된지는 상제기 살바도 로시세데 다 런던에 연수조가 되는데 다 대니지 용지나 조선고스 제거해야 돼다 지금 매체님 말하는 제거해 지지로 되는 민도 동버되게 메타발라서 손도아 대 메타발라서 대제 메타발라서 주도된 비용을 손면도 네 타마긴 돈을 들으셔야 돼 서로 연락 주니세 되면서 파신 올로라 용체 존이게 매여 도대 양년은 된다서 되게 치바리마도 온겐다 여버스 게마래.
So this too, one it says that all the paths of training in the spirit of enlightenment, the object of subsequent practice, thought, study, reflection, according to Olungpa. This refers to the problems of such as impermanence and so forth. and then others where we find the levels in the Bodhisattva's level mentioned that the 8 is the sublime teachings, the 12 branches of scriptures and so forth. So there is no contradictions at all between these two, because sometimes the instructions begins from the reflections on the impermanence, begins from the practice of impermanence, meditation on impermanence, and all the way to the state of enlightenment. This is how we begin. And then at some texts that we may find, the practice begins from the practice of Guru devotions. And we begin from the Guru devotions, and we then advance our practices all the way to the state of enlightenment. So there are different instructions that we may find, but that doesn't mean there is a paradox among those instructions.
No, maybe it's in the maybe you maybe Taji Jeba the Pian Sonominus, maybe she said, Su Terminus, Taji Jedoa, Denogi, Sora Yana Junior Casa, Junior de any Jebane, Doti any Niesi Jeba the China Sonda, the answer the Jet Sondo, Ni gone and Ni Jondi. And it maybe see the Chankan and the West maybe it's in the answer. You did not get Jetta Yimba Yimbala. Metimba Meban Zenji, Yanda Yanda Semba or Sondo.
So then here it says the way to have conviction is to become certain about this object, just as they are, and then to think about them again and again, and apprehending them without conflict.
Tanjitella Mepaki Yuleja, and maybe you tell any Memba Katechegure, Sena, Donda Deredoa, Roa, eat Jetta Yimbal and Yepa Yene, Metimba Meban Zenji, Yanda Yanda Sangure City, Shinju Jene, and Judenia Batella, ne Yanda Yanda Lodiba Chegure, steady.
So after going through a critical analysis, then it says the way to conviction, one will have a conviction is after going through a critical analysis, then to become as certain about this object, just as they are, and then think about them again and again, it says, again and again, and handling them without conflict.
Yi jibo tela shinju che sa yi le ja, ani tela shinju che ne, ani soso ki chuden ye so na, ani lo te gombe je ye so na, gomba ten so na, ani zoba tenbo chagre, jetsen da debi zoba chagre.
Therefore, it says, we talked about the 8 objects. So then one should go through analysis of the 8 objects, and when one become convinced of those 8 objects having no conflict among them, will then establish a patience of certitude about the teachings.
Donghe tangle da chula ngen jetsen ni ne shansa le goba de cheba de chula ngen de jeban hango so da rube se jeta shawa ne.
So then how to practice, the accordance with the passage in the Bodhisattva's level, I have set forth the set of 8 bases in respect to the patience of the accepting sufferings in 8 objects, with respect to the patience of certitude about the teachings. In particular, there is extensive coverage thereof the patience of the certitude about the teaching. And it says how to practice. When practicing the kind of patience, you practice the association with the 6 supreme and its 6 perfections. These are the same in the earlier explanation, except the generosity of patience and establish others in patience.
Chuling Senji, Zubason, Yon Mombo Yubinon, and the Shansa de Jabarindo, and the Jena Goba Yason inside. The dog drew the Cheta Shawane, Sondo. Zoba Kaya Ruan, she drew now. Tamba drew them down, patient drew someone drew but there. Jen Zopa and Goba, Zubi Jimba Yimba Mato, Hashiba than Jawo, Sondo.
So I was Negi Shosha in Marimche.
Oh, Lord Sana Pichi Yonjo Malo. Yeah.
So I overread earlier. So but here, let's read once again. If when it comes to the practice of patience, the instructions to the patients, Chirimbuchi or the Lama Tsongkhapa refers to the Bodhisattva's level, which actually have the text by the name of Bodhisattva's level, Jangsa, which has a detailed explanation of the practice of patience and so on. So therefore, if he refers to this, we find the reference of this text again and again in this text. So let's read again. That in accordance with the passage in the Bodhisattva's level, I have set for the set of eight bases with respect to the patience of accepting suffering in eight objects, with respect to the patience of certitude about the teachings. In particular, there is extensive coverage thereof the patience of certitude about the teachings.
아니 파시 조대대다 가사 담바 조대대 쇼 제시 디디치 잡으니 내가 데르셀리 마서 로체 지죠 다반 동부 반사자.
So we will talk about the six perfections and the six supremacies later, and we'll take a break here for 10 minutes.
대인당에 뒤뒤 진행시죠. 뭔가도 대 가서 담바 주된데 냥선에서데 지다에나 그 뭐마지 가서인데 진도와 제 저벌은 제 저벌 제 저벌은 저비 짐바 마토 제 하시바던 자고 송도와 항아서 짐비 파신시비 카톨라는 파신 주된 가서 담바 주된 당 파신 주된 인가 송사 대니나 카토 양도샤나 나사하고 그래.
So here now it talks about how to practice. When practicing any kind of patience, you practice it in association with the six supremacies and all six perfections. Says right. These are the same as in earlier explanations, except the generosity of patience means to establish others in patience. So we have gone through the six supremacies during our previous teachings. So if you can go back and look at that later, then you'll find that.
당가서 동보인다 때 당바스소나 아니 더르게 냐는제비 강사 배는 레텐데 센텐인지나네 다 센텐스소나 네 상추 생기 생바지 거래 생 대당바래
담바 쪽이나
담바 쪽이나 때 당바 생기지 다 냐서 lem바비 강사한테 간데 지거려서 아니 다 상추 당가서 리코스 파포 모쳐데 상추지 생지네 제설을 쇼벌을 소치 시작진다 소용도 가라 아니 상추기 생거래 세치.
So since this practice is, directed towards the practice of bodhisattvas, right? So therefore, it's right from the beginning, it talks about the generation of bodhicitta. So here now, six supremacies and all six perfections. So we know all the six perfections. So Rinpoche wants to go through briefly of those individually of what are the six supremacies again here, six supremacies. Six out of the six supremacies, the first Dendamba, which is the maintaining the mind of enlightenment as the fundamental basis, which means the Dendamba, the fundamental basis, that is the generation of bodhicitta, or the maintaining the mind of bodhicitta as the fundamental basis.
맞대로 담바세는 초 야쇼를 거거를 치 야쇼를 거디 다 드르기 냠선행에게 때 야쇼때 가르잖아 근데 샤추세라지레 댕에게 때데레서나 담마선 레저투로
So it is a Dhamma in Tibetan, which means sublime or the supreme. So why it is called supreme is because we as a followers of the practitioner of followers of the practice of the Bodhisattva, so our fundamental basis should be, our supreme fundamental basis should be the mind of enlightenment.
아니 뭐버 니바들은 뭐버 담바세도 뭐버 담바세다 짐바 맞다 저바이나 저비이다 저바 강원보다 아니 가서 샤젤레선으로 오지를 거네 이나 대야 상추생 생걸 son도.
So then the next is the Ngobo Dhamma, which means engaging in the sixth perfection in an unwise manner as the fundamental approach. That is the next.
아니 치의 샤와 담바세데 아니 선제 당지 내거든 아니 타투기 대주비 치에도 아니 다 저바이나 저발은 주고도.
So the third one is the Chedu Javatamba, working for the welfare of all sentient beings as a fundamental beneficiary of one's practice.
아니 턱해봐 담바 생인데 다 남의 또 비시라기 다 레동보를 남의 또 비시라기 생각을 마도 아니 남의 또 비시라고 보고도.
So then 턱해봐 담바, 탑담바 or 턱해봐 담바, which means conjoining one's practice with the wisdom of wisdom realizing selflessness or wisdom realizing emptiness.
홍화 담바세서나 다 아니 강체바 되니 아니 선제 당지 된도 조샤는 홍화 담바지고도.
So then the next is the fifth is Ngowa Dhamma, which means dedicating all one's virtue to the attainment of sublime state of enlightenment as the fundamental dedication.
다 넘버 담바 있는 미바 담바 있는 치사 대대련도 맞아 강한 랭게 부바데 아니 드닝 고비 된다라 아니 셔지 녀지당 아니 시지 드닝 사변데 좀 고비 된다라 제와달라 아니 미바 담바 있나 레 미바 담바니 치사. So
Namda Dhamma.
미바 담바 넘버 담바 있는 치 미바 담바 있는
Namda standing in this. King Buchedu Java Tab Damba, Wadam, Namda Damba, and it's lady.
Nabataba Tambara.
No.
Nabataba Tamba singing the any Jinin go pretend to me, Nabataba Tambas.
So then the last one is Nambar Damba Damba or the Namda Damba, which means applying antidotal forces against the two types of defilements as the fundamental purifications.
Take it number 2 then teacher. Was a passion to the Nelson language said, the Zubi passion number Nelson Navy, Chacha Corolla, and a passion to cut some edge.
So therefore, when speaking about engaging practice of six perfections, each of these perfection, for instance, if one is engaging practice of patience, and one's practice of patience must be conjoined with the practice of all six perfections.
De Katu Corolla, so Zubi passion Nelson and Kansa take it, and the Jen Zobala, Gubi Tundala, Zopagang was it. Conjust Tanji turned to Zopagang, the Kari Sanjapan, the Gender, she said, Senje Tanji Zoshan Gubi Dandala Shanju Senji Zoba Gambate de Yungu.
So here now, one's practice of patience, we're engaging in practice of patience in relation to other sentient beings, which literally working for the welfare of other sentient beings, because the very generation of bodhicitta is said to be working for the welfare of other sentient beings, right? One's practice of patience must become it must become a beneficial for oneself, but that of other sentient beings.
아니 제비 파신 양설레는데 추천인데 변은 예시 동비 추천선들이 아니 예시 동비 추천선은 단도 가나 여러 예시 동바인 전에 주송도 얘나야 관제 추천송 받게 아니 강해질래 도토 제윤데 그 라신이 뭐이 찾는 저번에 지러 추천생.
So then here now engaging in the practice of morality will become a practice of patience. It is true, because when we're engaging in practice of morality, you're refraining from doing something which requires patience. You're refraining from doing something, you're deliberately, abandoning, you're deliberately not engaging in something that you normally engaged in those particular activities, which requires some patience here.
다 동해 당내 지저바선을 출렁에서 지저바선나 준리로 다 게이쇼라 가세게 메게이쇼라 카테자가 게이쇼라 가세토나 갈레초는 게라 준지세로.
So then
제비
here,
파신을 내내바로 제비 냐래요디
accepting suffering, so developing the practice of accepting suffering, the patient of accepting suffering is accepting suffering, and as well as the certitude about the teaching, the patient of the certitude about the teachings, both becomes a diligence.
sometimes it moncho the thing is you more you are member tempo 다 제발에 tempo 지면서 제비 고자세디 관계자 도도 메통이 있어바로 내가 shipping 원인 자디 그 상대는 저 수치모 수지로.
But then also it's also have a very close connection with the meditative concentrations. Meditative concentrations. When it comes to the practice of patience, patience also requires certain level of concentrations. Without having certain level of concentrations, we won't be able to have a perfect practice of patience.
싫어니 강에 이게 출렁에서 유저 방법을 시에는 모두 셔야做的 다음에 이제 더 코너에서 나오는데 다 가세기 카테자는 쪼고된 데딩 와서 고쳐서도 쪼고지는 데딩 손에 계좌 대 말와 녀네 녀들은 로윤데 돈에 제신 만진의 로고로 만진의 로야데 단진이라 카테자 진진의 카테자 근데 다음에 또 비셔라도 상추선아지를 제데 로윤데 아니 그 싫어지 로바티 다랑 용으로.
But then the developing the patience of the certitude about the teachings is the practice of wisdom, right? Because it already mentioned very clearly, and this object to be actualized this is the reality of true selflessness. So this is how we go about with our practices, trying one's best to, making one's practice become an antidote towards our self-grasping and self-cherishing minds. And this is how we engaging with the combat with our negative thoughts and emotions. All this practice should become a combating force for our negative thoughts and emotions.
대다게 된디와 세디 네 준주 가사 즈비 파신게 네 사지 타마데리 나바 대다게 된디와 네 선데 된디 생에데게 지시지잖아요 마 근데 다들 체크해도 마라서 당가선을 라네 도야리 지시다 세야지 손지리 된디세. So
then we are at the summary. It is it's also it actually the last summary is the one that actually serves as a synopsis of the entire teachings of the perfection of patience.
나바 대다게 된디와네 should be then sent you but just attention, gamba nan so do. Senja Tanji Sabasi be Zobaran Goban Dubi, Zawa Yimbe. Te Jepe the Tane, Satumbi Zoba Naja, maybe you the Shene, Jean Tansa. Le Tombo Zubi Loja, Mi Sheba Shene, Sujan de Della Loba Tang. Jiki she be Tanglin Dana on, Shujuba La Zumba Goji. Deda Nyane just say Yawa Dona. Kana Matowa Chenmo Deme Jundu Goban Jeshin, Jawajan the Yang, Shansen Shoba made the Shon Nala, Nyans Lemba Chishin the Gawa, Jola, Lange Ne Damba Dene, Nubana, Tata Ne Dujin, Minibana, Samba Jana, Lazangi Shuba Le Somba Ta, Se Chung Dan, Donge Chung Zubi. Zoba, Sheba Yino,
So a summary, which is the recollections and cultivation of the spirit of enlightenment, the basis of the Bodhisattva's teach is the root of the wish to establish all beings in a patience, wherein they have extinguished the contaminations. After you steadily increase this spirit, aspire to practice the patience of those at high levels, and then train your mind in it. Distinguish the trainings for the patience of the beginning Bodhisattva. And then learn this properly. If you transgress the boundaries as explained, you must make an effort to amend this. If you neglect these transgressions at the time of practicing this training, you will be continually trained by the many great misdeeds. You will be continually tempted by the many great deeds. And even in the future lifetimes, your practice of the marvelous deeds of the Bodhisattvas will be extremely difficult. Seeing that the essential of the path are supreme, practice right now what you can, and then inculcate the intention to practice, even those you know cannot. If you do this, then as the questions of the Subhava Sutra says, you will bring the perfection of the patience to completion with the little difficulty and the minor suffering. So this practice of the Bodhisattva is an actual practice of the Bodhisattvas who are on the third bhumi, which is a Sasumbo Vijja, but the third bhumi, the radiant, third bhumi of radiant, what we call. But now for us, we have not on any bhumis. We're not on the Bodhisattva's bhumi. So what kind of patience, the fundamental patient practice that one may engage in? What is appropriate for one to engage in such practice of patience? So now, although this actual practice of the patience, the perfection patience, the practice of the perfection of patience is the actual practice of the bodhisattvas who are on the third bhumi. But then it is so we cannot just say that this is practice that requires only for the bodhisattvas who are on the third bhumi. This practice, one must make this practice of this patience, the practice that is undertaken by the bodhisattvas on the third bhumi, must be relevant with one's own self, one's own practice. How do we do that? And then here, we should think about what makes us unhappy here. What makes us, what actually puts us in a situation where it is not comfortable for us. It is impatience, right? That is the one which makes us unhappy. So therefore, why the impatience actually increases in us is because of this attachment, aversion, anger, hatred, pride, and so on and so forth. All those kind of negative thoughts and emotions are making us unhappy. They are the destroyer of our happiness. So therefore, in order to have a battle with those, we need a right battlefield and better force. This is the practice of patience. So therefore, one must make this practice of patience relevant to one's own practice right from now. It's very important.
다 된적이 차당생이 된 고발라 아니 현라 때는 차당 고고를 마도 라니 찍고 차당 고자서 개 말이 로 라니 찍고 현라 때는 차당 고고야나 아니 제다랑이 저와 가래래 제다랑의 제메 대제래도 무도 안 제메 대제 이나다 양 그걸 그러기 라니를 내버시 투에서 개 말이 라니 콜라 저와스 개명이 된적 개 말이 차당생이 먼저 nga chunso chi ne me dewa na gere chunso chi ne me de gu ya na chunso gi jwa khono no la me de cho ten go ro min zan de na gi gi nyomo do so se de chi chunso no lo ma tang sha na nya da zo yu chunso na ma ta de ran ni dang ne che so na de chi chuen yo de de gi de chi chuen ba dang nya da zo nge ni bu gi yan ji de la shin ge de la cha dang gi do dong de xie yo.
So therefore here now, when speaking about attachment and aversion. Attachment and aversion is taking place which take place within our continuum in relation to others, right? Without depending on others or without having a relation to others, there is no such attachment and aversion arises in us. So therefore, self and others are not something that is completely disconnected. We're all connected, so therefore, it is all this negative thoughts such as, attachment and aversion are actually, arises within us, within our continuum in relation to other sentient beings.
Tendriki kwa ten sobo chi le so na ene jen sobo la go ba de she go re so yu de she bi ten de ji be sen ji ji yang sa chen go re ene jen sobo la go re se yu de ene so da me bi so de pa ro po chong chong yin bi so ni ji ge so na nga so la go ko ske yo ma re.
So here now, when speaking about establishing others in the practice of patience, we should not have a notion that, I don't need a patient, but only others need this practice of patience. If you have this kind of notion, if you have this kind of, notion of practice of patience, just letting others engage in practice of patience, then it will not become a fruitful for us. So therefore, once having a pre-motivation of establishing others in the practice of patience, by doing that, this should help one's own development, one's own patience as well.
想去身边随便娘来的，人随便能够也女生呢，人随便能够比早前一边是谁的，过几年嘛都呢，我说我可是给妹妹说的就过年了，那你去说是给300多给便宜不多，可是我说别把进度可以老个多少，你我说去说那些呢，去就刚刚特别高了，俺可能你这是呢修老个，可能给便宜嘛，看结果老多少，别那一家呢300多错的这头不多。
So therefore, is whenever we engage in the practice of bodhisattva, such as this practice of patience, and establish, and leading others to engage in this practice, and we should always see the benefits. We should always understand the benefits that we receive from that by doing so, practicing, establishing others in the practice and following oneself the practice of this patience and so forth. Otherwise, when we think about, leading others to the practice of patience and thinking that something, whatever the practice that someone is doing, the patience practice someone is doing, it is irrelevant to oneself, one's own practice, then that is of no use. Just as that I was told a couple of weeks ago, a friend of someone whom I know, that they said, when we say compassion for others, when someone is doing something, and what is the benefit by saying I have compassion for you, by extending compassion towards that individual, whatever he or she is doing? What is so here now? It really tells us that that person is, when speaking about compassion, is not having an actual feeling inside just by saying a mouth. It's just a word, because there's no feeling involved. If you have a feeling involved when speaking about extending compassion towards others, certainly will bring benefits in one's own way of thinking.
第一的老有的，但这个让他比变得吃着我进来呢，我也是在我讲呢，可能口语拿着的，但那就查个马来的，口语拿着的，眼看的两把来的呢，让你看的就两头也别说的，三把的别乱乱做些的，对明白这？过以后等等做些呢，让你来也就是给我们呢，但是多的是呢，什么差多了吧？因此呢。 对这个干了恐怕担忧的高了，实际上就我说让你给这边你把是见面那样，实际上这一样的了，让你越把一传上起来有的，那让你别的，我说每个给团也嘛都，去别的干啥嘛，先看那么大嘛那一，冬天经济实际要是做不了，在我客人把强中原因，但这个说出来写得了有。
So here now. For instance, when we come across with animal who's suffering from a sickness. For instance, let's take an example of dog. A dog is seriously ill, and by seeing that, it is not just by saying that I have compassion for this dog. Expressing that words is not really beneficial. It's beneficial for oneself or to the dog as well, either. So therefore, one should, by seeing that the suffering individual, and suffering animal, and try to, feel that suffering that is going. Experiencing by the individual, and think about that, putting yourself in that particular individual's shoes, and what will happen to me if I go through this suffering. And this is the kind of feeling that you should have when you say that I have a compassion for this individual. If you look at on the surface, it may seem that you are actually accepting some kind of suffering. You are going through a suffering because of having such, pity feeling towards this individual. But if you look very carefully and deep down, it actually establishes a peace of mind. It actually reduces your, turmoil thought and, establishing the peace of mind underneath. So that with this practice, if you, endeavor, continually on such practice, and this practice will become very familiar with oneself and become natural with oneself. Although that in, directly you may not be able to help other sentient beings, but when it comes to your own way of extending compassion will become so effective for others and that of oneself. And this is how we establish a peace of mind in our continuum.
또 현대 코드랭이 이 가사지나 제위 신화제데 제위 신화제나 선제 가르제는 내가 시시고 말해. 근데 선제 가시 나서도 이제 매일 통화 가시 선제 가시 마시고는 춘 주셔 마시고는 면에 자상이래. 가시 이게 또 뭐지 나사 여바 장지기 저와기 메서니래. 근데 지금 매니데 해소하이나 맞 저와 얘기 못 가로. 저와 얘기 못 통소나 라시 얘기 선제도 코양지 지바 라니 지바 젠지바 장소요도 때문에 전투기 변에 소자 통제를 배대 세와 전쟁의 인소나 가서 뭐듯이 저다의 선제 계획이 통하면 차로도 대전지 제바 세도도 당가 최선 유쇼.
So here now, this is how we actually practice to become oneself as a working for the welfare of other sentient beings. When we speak about practicing the Bodhisattva's deed, following the Bodhisattva's deed, following the Bodhisattva practice. And so this is how we learn ourselves to have a naturally arisen sense of caring system or the sense of connectedness. With this kind of practice, the sustained practice will then eventually overpower your all kind of negative thoughts and emotions. And then you will not have even a single thought of harming other sentient beings. So, so here let's just think about, many individuals that are beings who are engaging in all kind of activities that actually takes the life of animals, because before the death of the animal, they just burn them or throw them into the running waters and so on and so forth. And in other words, there's harming and taking the life of other sentient beings. If your mind is completely overpowered or conjoined with genuine sense of caring and sense of connectedness with other sentient beings, this kind of activities will be forbidden. This kind of activities will be abandoned. So will not arise in us. Will not follow such activities. So if you have such kind of sense of caring and connected with other beings, the even animals, when you see the even animals, will be delighted to see you. So therefore, all these practices are to become oneself as a better person and providing, becoming a factor for benefiting other sentient beings.
차단 슈첨보 여사기 영역이 매지나 근데 상제 슈첨보 여사기 매니 쿠유를 따데 너무 진노에나 소소로 코드 가고제나 아니 그런 신자 되어도 백모도 나신 용으로 너무 진네 계시나.
If even think about in our family level, if we were to compare two individuals who has more attachment and aversion, who has more compassionate and loving person, who will you be choosing? You want to choose other one who has more attachment and aversion, or you want to choose someone who has more compassionate and loving and caring person? Certainly we will choose the other one, right? Someone who is compassionate and loving ones, even in our family level speaking.
되지. 그런 데들 손도아. 근데 제 제페도 당시 사 통비 줘봐도서 맞추게 년에 것이 제투고 말이야. 얘나요. 하나 이유도 전에 년에 또 그래서. 근데 레 동보한테서 이게 아니 다 차단세나래. 그냥 제필 하셔 충사. 아니 차단이 님이 채서서 그래. 된지라 미셔네. 아니 신주제네. 아니 랑마노한테 단단히 년에 제고 그래서 손도아.
Although that it says now, although that we may not be able to, engage in the practice that are undertaken by the bodhisattvas who are in the high levels of the bhumi, we need to prepare right from now. Analyzing what kind of negative thoughts and emotions that makes us unhappy, and what kind of antidote that is to be applied, that needs to be applied to abandon, to eradicate those negative thoughts and emotions right from now. We need to prepare ourselves, by stepping forward towards this bodhisattva's bhumi, right from now.
아니 하바도 컨트롤 소바게 되다 간제 제비 냥내기 아니 셀에 개봤던데 존소와이나 근데 통전 담마셔야지 근데 실제제도 제선제 당선제 는 가출은제서 신절로 당선제네 고레마도 아니 총총지 존소세 개요 말에서는 아니 체세 제셔와이나 아니 그 몽보슈위치 총총 몽보치 사유디 저와 심만나서요 아니 제비 냥내는 좀 못이 차그래서도
So then, therefore, once you know how important it is to practice patience, then one should always be very careful, be very vigilant. One should not just think, oh, this is just a minor anger, or it is just not a very serious anger. I just had a little bit of, unhappy with such and such person. I don't care about that. This is nothing. So you should not really. You should not have any kind of contemptuous attitude towards your negative thoughts and emotion, even how minor they may be. As soon as you notice that there's some kind of negative thought that arises in oneself, and try to get rid of that, and then commit yourself not to let such negative thoughts and emotions occur in your continuum in the future. So this is how we should train ourselves. If otherwise, if we are unable to do that, just a minor negative thoughts and emotions, if you just ignore this, and then this will implants propensities within one's continuum, and then will carry on those negative thoughts and emotion in one's future life. So you will not be able to engage in practice of patience in our future life as well.
你要想去生病，也想去生健的学不了就是人呢。你个老家那个说让了大人说的，让今年当不呢，对呢，说个住那个月呢，你也把的住，住个呢，说个你把的搞了住个说呢，你就把穷人点呢。你东海穷人帮一些呢，你这边发现要是做图会说的。
So then the text says that seeing that the essential of the path are supreme, right? Practice right now what you can. And then inculcate the intention to practice even those cannot. If you do this, then as the question of the Subhava Sutra says, you will bring the perfection of the patience to compassion with a little difficulty and minor suffering.
yang xiang la tebi ci to me de si jong so na de lo be han do ma bo chen ne kon zhe de de chen na da ma zhe ya zhe de jie mu duo ta de ba ta na de sa ma ro
So here now, this is how we practice our patience. The patient, armor-like patience. How do we, the armor-like patience cannot be developed overnight. It requires rigorous practices and familiarizations. But as you familiarize with such practice, then eventually you'll be able to have a practice what we call the armor-like practice. Patience will be accomplished. So otherwise, if one is not paying attention to one's negative thoughts and emotions such as anger and so forth, it just let it arise in our mind, and we're accepting that and embracing those, then such practice of patience is not possible for us. And then even one small instant and even one word, unpleasant word, will actually destroy the peace of one's mind. Without having a patience, it's not helping oneself, let alone it will become a beneficial for others. It is actually not benefiting us at all. In fact, it is actually, putting us in the situation of suffering.
타마소기 라네 데스 도에 다 거거로 타마도나 두마 야도 티야마 나지 다 소소기 당전의 지자는 치토메지 레서는 게들 카데자가 민다 저바 제기다 지제 통비도 안 소소를 주보이나 가레나 지 강에 준비 채워다 다가라기 온도네 지루고 밀레버 제금이다 텔 안에 데스 제토에 제기니다 생이게 신주들 자원이는 가서 재미와 왔다 봐로 제가 계속 가려도 가서 진 따면와 있잖아요 매번 시작해 So,
the fact is that, up until now, we have never analyzed ourselves, what the benefits we may gain out of engaging practice of patience. We have never seen, the good qualities of the practicing patience. If we have really gone through our analysis and found and become oneself as gain some kind of conviction of having a benefits by engaging in practice of patience, we may have done in the past, but we have never done that because we have never analyzed and we have never noticed, we have never known that by practicing patience is something that is beneficial for us. For now, we should try to look at it and see if I am able to be patient when someone speaks even a one word, unpleasant word. If I be able to be able to maintain my tolerance, what kind of benefit that one may have. If I'm able to, have some kind of physical discomfort, if I'm able to be patient, what kind of benefit that I may gain out of it by practicing patience and so forth. So if you go through those analyses, you will find a great benefits by engaging in those practice of patience.
맞추기 잡았을 때 말에 계속 매 연다지 소소 치주라고 질러나 다 유쇼 콜레가 카티자 가르쳐 그래서 제디 그 제비코는 진짜 조금 말에 그 파쇼들 semba nolo la tsana ducha yebi to ne yusho se de le chadi zebi kon kon ro mari pa ndabna malo nai ta tane gi soba chego di pa yusha wa de ni ye sen no la tane che ne keke menge ji goro sama tsanja de ga su jin de chego mari.
So here now our way of engaging practice of patience is something that is very, very ordinary. Just think about it. When someone says something bad about oneself, and when someone, says the word that is unpleasant to oneself, something that is offensive to one, and we may say, well, let's be patient, you let go of it, just ignore. But at the same time, your mind is totally disrupted. Your peace of mind is totally gone, and you have great deal of anger inside, animosity inside. Although that you may say, oh, let go of it, I'll be patient. But if you analyze very carefully, you have this anger that is growing in you. It is just growing in you. And but just having this anger within you by saying just let go of it is not a real practice of patience. Real patience is accepting suffering. That is what is meant by real practice of patience. In someone suffering, you should not disturb your mind. It should not, by means of others' word, unpleasant word, should not be, generating any animosities or anger within your continuum. That is what is meant by practice of patience.
就是这所有的点对点用就因此记录呢，你什么了？第一次上那里去到呢，就带了把车去下着我的话，娘嘞多东西。
So this, the summary part, I would suggest that you can read, take your time and read again and again, and practice will be very beneficial.
对是落的效应的，尊这些人，一吧，尊这些拍戏写吧了，那尊这些我在娘是两把人就比头，尊这些肉的也哇，在主边是接到小啊，得到个团队吧，我去，同步呢，没把给我了，明年那把我把做啊的，选就嘞，整个给了做我写说是，你想啥嘞？ Giwa duba dang senje je tuanxe yu xie de sen ngoba zhuwa shi je ma lo ba dang de lang bi go song je le yo la xie do song.
Okay, now we're on the perfection of joyous perseverance, chapter 13, which is on the page 182. How to train in the perfection of joyous perseverance. This section has 5 parts. What joyous perseverance is, how to begin the practice of joyous perseverance, the divisions of the joyous perseverance, how to practice, a summary. So there are 5 parts. And what joyous perseverance is, when you have focus upon something virtuous, joyous perseverance is enthusiasm for it. Engaging in the Bodhisattva state says, what is joyous perseverance? It is delight in virtue. The Bodhisattva's level explained, it has a flawless state of mind that is enthusiastic about accumulating virtue and working for the welfare of living beings, together with the physical, verbal, and mental activities, such as the state of mind motivates.
对起，当个是设计把了尊重娘嘞喇叭台语的，设计把了越超啊是那个的，像是设计把的了越超，设送把的越些吧，你随便拍些娘嘞喇叭头吧，你设计把的了，你尊重就拍些娘嘞喇叭头吧，你钱了越超啊是。
Emanating light of the Bodhisattva who are on the Bhumi, the fourth Bhumis of the Bodhisattva's level, the fourth level of the Bodhisattvas or the fourth Bhumis of the Bodhisattva, is the main practice is the practice of joyous perseverance.
他这里得下问，他我说他的确实你个人呢，啥比给我点出就送的啥比给我呢，手机的那边拖了点呢。 你想去就山，想去山别当把人，想去就学把移动了，最近的老把了的呢，作为上级就跟我另外的到把些，你让你到把了的呢，你现在到了个把就大概即将的项目，现在吧样别那去边呢，两个图片我这边，哪里这边老嘛那就现在老多是啥呢？我的忙接了去的。
So let's do our dedication now. By means of gathering the virtue that we have accumulated today, particularly today, and also the accumulated in the past, and to be able to follow the teachings of this Bodhisattva's practice, and trying one's best to following this Bodhisattva's practice, unmistaken way of following the Bodhisattva's practice. By means of those virtues, may I establish may myself and all other sentient beings establish in the state of enlightenment as soon as possible. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the Lam Rim lineage gurus bless me to be able to do this.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Rinpoche.
Huh?
Nima Lam.
Thank you.
Samjana go, everyone.
Have a great
Good
week.
night.
Oh, yeah. Good night.
Good night.